Hello, people. Today I have with me a man known for his work as Obi Wan on Star Wars The Clone Wars, Ratchet on Ratchet and Clank, Johnny Test, and Wooldor Sockbat on Drawn Together, Mr. James Arnold Taylor.
Hey, I know now, Michael. I understand. Is this like an anniversary date? Is this a red letter date for your podcast here?
It is, James. It's the one
Yes.
year to this day, not the day this interview is being put up, but the day we record this is the 1 year anniversary of the day my
Hmm.
first interview was put up. So,
Well, see, I knew the force was strong with you, my friend. Very good.
oh, oh, thank you for doing that. So, first question: how did you get started in voice acting?
I unlike a lot of people, where I think a lot of people fall into voice acting as if they were a character actor, or they found it to be something they enjoyed after another career in the entertainment world. I've always wanted to be a voice actor. I've sought it out since I was 4 years old. I saw cartoons and they kind of changed my life in that. And I thought, there are people making those voices and I want to do that. And I want to study it and find out about it and be passionate about it. And I have really tried to do that my whole career and throughout my life. So I started when I was very young in that regard of loving it and pursuing it. I started officially doing it when I was 17. I got my first job in radio. When I was 16, I was doing stand-up comedy, and that really helped me create all of it. But working in radio was the foundation for me as a voice actor in establishing microphone technique, understanding of equipment, understanding of all the various aspects of how you can entertain solely by your voice and not just by your body language or your expressions and things, which is a truly important part of the voice acting world. So early on, I started doing that. It's been almost 30 years then that I've been doing all of this, and then pursued it with a passion and a hunger since then. So it has been a long journey, but a really fun one. I'm the luckiest guy in the world because I get to do what I love, and what I love is also, I think, the coolest job in the world. So there you go.
Hmm. And do you remember what your first voice acting job was?
My first official, outside of radio, where I was hired to do voice stuff, yes, I was 20 years old, I would think, and I was doing some video games for a Japanese company. This was back in the, wow, I would say probably 1990. So it was then. And these different games I did, one was called Emit, and it was time spelled backwards, EMIT.
Hmm.
And that game, they needed somebody that could be the voice of everything from a young kid to an old man to play the lead character who aged backwards. And so that's why the game was called Emit, time backwards, again, time spelled backwards. So it was a very kind of, Benjamin Button, or one of those kinds of stories, told in a really unique way. It was an interesting game. I don't imagine it's available anywhere now, but I did that. And then I did a lot of voiceover for Japanese companies for doing English language tapes for teaching children in Japan how to speak English. And were those were great because it was, Tommy has a ball. His ball is red.
Hmm.
Susan has a blue ball. Whatever. It's just,
Hmm.
giving these things so children in grade school would learn English. And you had to over enunciate everything, and then, but it gave me the chance to do other voices and stuff too. And I love doing it. The games were more fun. So that same company made all these games. They made a game called Distrega, which was another game that I did very early on in my career. And I played a character kind of similar to Tidus in Final Fantasy X,
Hmm.
so many years later, decades later. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. But that was all in my very early 20s. Yep.
Right. And if you could pick some of your like favorite roles or roles that you've enjoyed playing the most, what would some of them be?
Oh, I get asked often about, like, if I have a favorite character, and I honestly mean this when I say it. I try to take pleasure in whichever one I'm doing at the time and make that one my favorite. I really do. So if I'm voicing Obi Wan Kenobi, well then Obi-Wan is my favorite at the time. If I'm doing Yabba Dabba Doo, Fred Flintstone, then Fred is my all-time favorite. If I'm doing Johnny Test, well, then Johnny Test is my favorite. If I'm doing Yondu in Guardians of the Galaxy, although that one is pretty cool, I'd have to say that's my favorite. So, I try to make it my favorite at the time, although to say all time ones that have had the greatest impact on me in my career, certainly Obi Wan Kenobi has had that impact. The fans of Star Wars are wonderful fans and dedicated fans, and uh, really great to all of us performers in that world, but also the world of Final Fantasy, playing the character Tidus in that, and Ratchet and Clank. I've been very blessed, very fortunate to be able to be involved in some of the biggest video game and movie franchises as a part that nobody would even think of existing. So if I do my job right, nobody thinks about me, but I've been able to kind of be under the radar through all these fantastic things and work in all of them and be a part of them. So they're all, it's really hard to pick a favorite. It really is, but that's why I try to just kind of live in that moment each time, because it's every day is a new adventure.
And when you were starting out, or even now, do you really watch any of the stuff that you're in?
um, yeah, some people don't. I find that a lot of times you'll talk to an actor and they'll be like, "Yeah, I don't watch myself. I don't listen to myself." I I like watching the stories. I'm a fan of comic books. I'm a fan of video games. I'm a fan of animation. So if I'm in something that is a cool story, something like the Clone Wars, for example, I would watch that show whether I'm on it or not, because it was just a fantastic show. So I do watch the stuff. I do play the games that I'm in from time to time. I'm not always the best at them. Like when I was a kid and I played Donkey Kong and Pac-Man, and that was easy. But some of these games now are a little more advanced, but I try to play them all as much as I can and enjoy them as much as I can too. And so yeah, I do. I follow them up. I keep up on them as much as I can.
Like, was it ever weird, like hearing yourself for the first time, like in a cartoon or a game? Like, was it ever like weird for you?
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's still like that at times where I go, "This is a trip, man. That's me." Because if I again, as I say, and I say it a lot in my stage show and stuff too, if I do my job right, nobody knows I exist, and so hopefully I can even kind of get to the point where I'm able to watch a story and go, not be caught up in, oh, I should have said it this way, or I should have done that, or why did I do that voice? I just try to kind of get into it and watch and enjoy the story, because I also generally try to pick projects that I respect the people making it and am excited about the journey that they're taking. So I want to watch it to see what they did and to be a part of it in that regard. So yeah, very much so. Yeah, it's fun.
It's kind of funny because with the Star Wars thing, it's kind of really good timing because it's Revenge of the Fifth. Kind of a
Yes,
good
look at
timing with
that.
that.
Yes, May the 4th was yesterday, of course, and it was with us, but now I feel a tremor in the force, the day of the 5th. But
Hon-
yeah, it's pretty good.
Honestly, I feel like there should be one with the sixth too, because I feel that would work a little better with sixth.
Yeah, Revenge of the Sixth, I think, is probably better, right? Yeah, so Revenge of the Sixth. I mean, that's the good. Isn't that just like the dark side though? That they would try to make 2 days out of it, and instead of one. So yeah, look at there you go.
Right, and as like again, you're Obi Wan, which is a huge role. And were you ever like a big Star Wars fan as a kid?
Oh yeah. Yeah, Star Wars was very much a huge part of my world because I grew up with it. I mean, I was 7 years old when the first movie came out, and it did change the way we looked at movies. It changed the way I looked at characters, and we didn't play good guys and bad guys anymore, cops and robbers or things like that. We played Star Wars, and I know that seems obvious to kids nowadays because it's been around, but it was brand new and it was magical, and it was something that was amazing. I'll be honest, my favorite out of all of them are outside of Star Wars is Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones.
Hmm.
I was a huge Indiana Jones fan, so those were my go-tos, Star Wars and Indiana Jones. But Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, Last Crusade, those movies really made the biggest impact on me as a young guy trying to kind of figure out what he wanted to do. And Star Wars was a huge part of it as well. But I never could have imagined that I'd be playing Obi Wan Kenobi, though, because Obi Wan Kenobi was this old guy that gets killed by Darth Vader, so and comes back as a ghost. So who could have imagined way back when that George had these other ideas kicking around in his head to tell that story? I mean, even though he always talked about it, that was kind of a pipe dream to all of us that he'd actually ever make them. And so when they came out in the 90s, it was great because it was this whole resurgence of it. And then you've got kids growing up with it through that. And then Clone Wars comes out and you've got new generations growing up with that. So it's been really amazing to see the growth of this and how it just never seems to die. People never get tired of Star Wars. And, I'm thrilled about that. Not for my own gain, but I mean, just because I think it's wonderful storytelling.
Now I'm curious because I was curious because with Star Wars Rebels, they've been bringing back surprisingly like quite a few people. Like James Earl Jones has come in, Frank Oz has come in, and were they originally considering Ewan McGregor or Hayden Christensen for Clone Wars?
For Clone Wars, no. Not to my knowledge. We had done the micro series of the Clone Wars, and that was done several years earlier. And then the video games and things like that were all there. And so I had been doing a lot of work already, just like Tom Kane, who voiced Yoda, and Admiral Yularen, and the narrator on the show. So I think at that point in time, they were not looking to do any of the film actors for the animation. They wanted to use voice actors that worked within that world, knowing that it was going to be a weekly show and a day-to-day kind of basis working on it. So now I think, Disney's behind it. They have a different aspect and a different look to it than George had, and a different vision certainly than George had for Clone Wars as opposed to Rebels. So I think that a lot of it is that, it's I think due to Clone Wars helping and creating such a fantastic following in that world of animation and Star Wars, it gives them greater opportunities now for the show to go and get these other actors who are, of course, tremendous and responsible for bringing life to those characters to begin with, the original voices. So, it's wonderful that they get to do it. I was thrilled to actually be the one that still voiced Obi-Wan in the first episode of Rebels, giving that hologram message and stuff. I was quite honored to be able to do that they didn't go to Ewan for that. But, yeah.
Because I've always been curious, because I know Anthony Daniels has like always come back for C-3PO. I've always known that. And
yes, and Anthony won't let anybody else voice C-3PO. Come on, what are you kidding?
Well, I know Tom Kane's done it a couple times. I know.
Yeah, Tom has done it a few times, and Tom does an amazing 3PO, indeed. But no, Anthony. I mean that in great respect to Anthony, that he loves the character and he's very passionate about it and wants to make sure that it's always given his perspective on it. And so he makes sure that he's involved as much as he can be.
It kind of makes me sad because I saw the trailer for season 2 of Rebels, and I thought, because again, Frank had come back to play Yoda, James has come back to play Vader, which I still find amazing they were able to do that. I honestly thought Ian McDiarmid would have come back to play the Emperor, but they apparently didn't get him back, which I still find weird.
Yeah,
because he's said before he'd play it again if they ever asked him. So
yeah, interesting. I don't know. He'll be at Star Wars Weekends with me in 2 weeks. Perhaps I'll ask him about that if you'd like.
Because I know,
and I can give you credit for the question.
Oh, but it's funny because I remember when Ian Abercrombie played it. I actually originally thought that was Ian McDiarmid in the Clone Wars series. So
Ian Abercrombie was fantastic, an amazing man, an amazing actor, one of the sweetest guys you'll ever meet. You never would expect him to be the emperor of the universe, but he was great, and it was such a pleasure to get that time with him as a cast. We all just loved it because we all recorded together always, of course, every episode. So he would come in and tell us stories of working on Seinfeld or working in the theater in London or doing comedy or drama and all the various things he's had in his career. He was a really wonderful man. It was very sad for us to lose him while we were still in production of that show. And but his final episode that they dedicated to him was such a tremendous episode too. It was so perfect to be that. And then of course the legendary Tim Curry came in and filled in for him as well
I still
after his passing.
I still find that such a weird replacement. Like,
Yeah. It was interesting in that he did his own thing, and rightly so, an actor of that strength to be able to come in and do that. It was great, and he was wonderful, and it was a very different spin on the character and very different outlook of it. But so yeah, so that character is one to be played by various people, I guess, and that as it happens so often in the world of voiceover as well when things are converted to an animated project.
and I was curious because you're also in a lot of DC stuff. Like, is it the same thing with Star Wars? Were you a comic book person as a kid?
Big, yeah, huge. I was actually a very big comic book fan of both Marvel and DC. I never had any prejudice towards one or the other, but I was a huge Flash fan. Flash is probably arguably my favorite all time. Toss up between him and Spider-Man, and I've been very fortunate to actually get to be the voice of both of them. I'm Lego Flash and Lego Spider-Man, but I've been the Flash and Spidey in several other incarnations outside of the Lego world too, and that's just been great fun. It's really an honor because again, I still have my boxes of comics with all of those encased in plastic with cardboard backing now, but protected. But they're all the ones that I bought as a little kid and read every
Like,
day.
pull it out from the bottom
So
of the
yeah.
closet with like all the plastic wrap on it, and like
Yep.
nobody can touch them. They're mine.
Yep, that's it. That's it. So yeah, no, I was a big fan of Justice League, but Spider-Man, so What Ifs, Spidey Super Stories. I loved Fantastic Four, X-Men. I was a huge Green Lantern and Green Arrow fan. Yeah, I Superman somewhat, but and Batman. Got into Batman when I was more of a teenager, when the Dark Knight and Frank Miller did all of that stuff that really changed things there, and so I was a huge fan of that work as well. So yeah, but always have loved comic books. Always, in fact, in my stage show, I do a whole segment on that, and the whole feel of the show, I try to give it kind of a comic book feel because they were such an influence on my life. Movies and comics were a huge influence on my life growing up. Yeah.
Hmm. And I got to bring this up because this has been something that's been bothering me for a while. Not really bothering, more so just
Uh-oh.
being
Okay.
curious. All right,
Yes.
you did Drawn Together, which
Yeah.
is one of my favorite shows ever. It's one of the
Yes.
funniest things I think I've ever
Oh, okay.
watched. But
Yes.
what was it like doing that?
Well, Drawn Together, and for your listeners that may not know, Drawn Together was a very adult animated show on Comedy Central. And when I did that, you and I were chatting before the show here, and I was talking about the use of profanity or things, and how I'm not a big user of that. And it's one of those things where this show was very much a lot of that going on. But here's the deal: when I first went in and read for the show, it was for the creators of the show, Matt and Dave. They're just these fantastic guys with a wonderful sense of humor, wonderful sensibility, and a great outlook on life. And I had no idea what the content of the show was. And I went and I read, and a lot of times in an audition, it's not going to show you some of the more intense, shall we say, words and things. And so it wasn't until I booked the job and then I got in to do the first session and I realized what kind of show I was doing. I was like, oh my gosh. But they were so, I guess the thing I loved about them, and as a fan of the show, you would see this, they were equal opportunity offenders. They didn't care. They weren't trying to make any political statement. They weren't trying to make any huge mark other than to say, aren't we all kind of stupid? Aren't we all really, just thinking we know so much more than we do? And I liked that. I liked their sensibility. I think their sense of humor is very funny. And again, they offended everybody equally. And it was one of those shows that it got canceled from Comedy Central because it was to the people at Comedy Central it was too offensive. So that gives you the idea of what a show, because if you can offend those people, then you have done something special.
Yet,
But
South
they were
Park is
great.
still on.
Yeah.
Yet South Park is still on. So go
Yeah.
figure.
Amazing. South Park is still on, but our show was too offensive. So, we got what, 4 seasons and then a movie out of it. And no, I had a lot of fun. It was always fun. We did not record together as a cast, which always bothered us because Cree Summer, Jess Harnell, Tara Strong, Adam Carolla, myself. You've got so many wonderful other talents that we had that came in to do the show, and everybody recorded on their own. Jack Plotnick, of course, as well. Jack is an amazing comedian and funny guy. So it was always great, but we just see each other in passing in the hallway. Like I'd come in and Cree would be finishing. And Cree and I know each other for years because we've worked on so many projects together, and we're always just like, I wish we were in the room together. And same with Jess, who's just one of my heroes in voiceover, as well as a good friend. So we would end up watching what we all did later as we watched the show. But yeah, it was a very raunchy, very wild show, and a lot of fun to be involved in.
All right, because it's funny because I think that's the show. I think I've never laughed harder at a show like that in my life, because
Oh.
it's kind of equal opportunity. Because I'm kind of amazed at how it somehow offends everything.
Yeah, it did. And so, and in a way that again was just to show the fun of it all. So, yeah, a very, yeah, that's about the only place you'll ever hear me say anything that is considered R-rated or above, even for that show. Yeah.
Now, I'm curious about one more thing, like before we wrap this up.
Uh-huh.
About like because you're Ratchet and Clank, and there's been the movie if you're allowed to say anything. The movie is
Yeah,
supposedly
yeah.
supposed to come out sometime around this year. Do you know anything like if there's going to be coming
No,
out soon or?
it's interesting. And I've been very open about this, and they're aware of that, because obviously we've recorded all the dialogue. It's all already done. It is, I believe, in its finishing stages. I get Kevin Monroe, who's the director of it, sends me tweets every once in a while saying, or texts saying, it's coming along, and it will be out at some point in 2015. We know that. I think we're probably getting very close to that point. I hope to have an announcement, but honestly, because it is funny, people on Twitter will go, why don't you just tell us? And it's like, I find out just about pretty much everything the same way everybody else does. I see it on Twitter or on social media of some sort or online. That's how I find out I'm hosting events. That's how I find out I got characters. That's how I'll find out the Ratchet and Clank movie has been released, because they don't generally tell us as the actors much of anything. And it is because, again, as per our conversation before the show started, there's so many NDAs, there's so many top secret things. So, it's probably easier for them to just not mention it to us and let us, find out like everybody else. But so yeah, I wish I had more information. I wish I had a date I could give you all, but I do not know when the movie will be coming out. I will say, I believe everybody will really enjoy it. If you were a fan of Ratchet and Clank through the games, through the years, you will really love this movie because it's true to form. It's true to the games. TJ Fixman, who was the writer of so many of the games, wrote the script and did a great job. It has the sensibility of the games. When I was in the sessions recording it, it felt like I was just recording another game, which I've recorded, I think, 14 or 15 different games as Ratchet. So it is great. I hope it does really well, not because, of course, I want it to do well, make a bunch of money. Obviously, I want it to make a bunch of money so people appreciate it. But I hope it does really well because I think it's a great product, and I hope everybody enjoys it. I hope the fans enjoy it, and I hope that it creates new fans because it's just a fun franchise to be involved with.
All right, and I gotta say, thank you so much for letting me interview you.
Oh, sure. My pleasure. Thank you.
And
Absolutely.
is there any advice you can give to people that would be interested in getting in voiceover?
There's several things, obviously, again, that's something I get asked quite a bit. One thing I would say, or a couple things, I would say to go to D. Bradley Baker's site. I want to be a voiceactor.com and look at that. D created that because so many people ask him on a daily basis how to become a voice actor, what's involved. You can go to his site. It's all free. I want to be a voiceactor.com. And then also, I would say to pick up Tara Platt and Yuri Lowenthal's book, Voiceover, Voice Actor, which really spells it all out for you. They wrote a great book. So those are like great starting points. Of course, follow all of us on Twitter and interact where you can. Study voiceover, know and love voiceover. I mean, that was the big thing for me, is to understand who your heroes are in it, understand how it works, understand your own voice. More than anything, you have to understand your voice. You know, this is very strange for me because I've been talking with you now for 27 minutes or so in my own voice. Most of the time I'm in a booth talking in somebody else, but I have to understand how my voice works in order to do all those other voices. I have to know what my strengths and weaknesses are. So I think a lot of people want to just get into it and do a bunch of impressions, or they want to do a bunch of original voices, or they want to do anything outside of their own voice. But know your own voice first, understand how it works, be able to do anything with that, and from there you can create so much more with the voices that come out of you after that. Hope that makes sense to everybody. But it's I think it's a critical thing, because if you're going to actually compete and live and work in the world of voiceover, it's all about being able to perform on the drop of a hat, you know, and give them whatever they're looking for. And if you don't know what you're capable of with your original tool, then you can't know what to do with all the other things that they ask for. So very important stuff there. And to take care of your voice. You know, I don't, I lost my voice due to black mold 10 years ago, got very sick, and lost a lot of my range and had to work very hard to get it all back. But so I take very good care of my voice, but I recommend to people, you know, to do so as well. Room temperature water, not cold water, not sodas and a lot of alcohol or sugary things or chocolatey things, especially before a session. It's just not good for you, not good for your voice, not good for your body. But yeah, you want to take care of it. Don't strain it for the sake of straining it. Don't do voices that are out of your range. You know, I mean, I could go on and on and on, but if you love the craft of voice acting, study it, know all about it, and it will be something that you can do.